far beyond the familiar stars of Earth. In a sector where broken moons floated like silent witnesses to forgotten wars, a human soldier stood among the aftermath of victory. Captain Elias Ward did not celebrate like the others. Around him, coalition officers laughed, traded stories, and argued over prizes taken from the defeated pirate faction. The battlefield still smelled of burned metal and cooling engines, but for many, the danger had already faded into memory. Humanity had only recently joined the Galactic Coalition. Some species admired humans for their bravery and quick thinking, while others viewed them as unpredictable outsiders who did not always respect established traditions. Elias knew this well. He had felt the weight of curious stares and quiet judgment since the first day he stepped into Coalition service. The tradition after any major victory was simple. Surviving equipment, technology, and non-hostile captives were catalogued and redistributed according to rank. Officers gathered in a large docking bay where rows of captured beings waited behind transparent barriers. Some were fierce warriors from defeated factions. Others were engineers or traders caught in the wrong place. Many species believed that these selections showed both power and status. Elias walked slowly past the rows. He ignored the loud discussions behind him. That one is a combat specialist. Strong and loyal. The energy technician will bring high value. He watched as commanders eagerly chose exotic allies or rare technological assistants. Bright armor reflected the docking lights, and translators hummed constantly as different languages overlapped. At the far end of the line stood someone who did not attract attention. She was small compared to most species present, thin and quiet, wrapped in a simple containment field that flickered occasionally. Her skin held a faint silver tone, almost blending into the background. Her large eyes moved carefully, studying everything but meeting no one's gaze for long. A holographic label hovered beside her. Classification: non-viable. Low threat, low utility. Several officers had already passed her without stopping. One even laughed softly. Why keep that one? No combat skills, no technical rank. Barely responsive. Another shrugged. Scrap category, probably assigned to labor somewhere. Elias stopped walking. He studied her closely. Unlike the others who displayed fear or anger openly, she remained still, yet her eyes were not empty. They moved in tiny shifts, tracking lights, movement, energy signatures that most beings would ignore. When nearby equipment powered up, her posture changed slightly, as if she felt the vibration before it became visible. Something about her did not match the label. "You've reached the end of the selection," a coalition officer said behind him. "You still need to claim your prize, Captain." "I have." The officer followed his gaze and frowned. "That one?" "You're joking." "No. Captain Ward, you earned priority choice after leading the assault." "You could take a high-value asset. Why select something useless?" Elias ignored the comment. He stepped closer to the containment field. The alien's eyes lifted, meeting his for the first time. There was caution there, but also curiosity. "Release the field," he said calmly. The officer hesitated but complied. The transparent barrier faded, and the alien stepped back slightly, unsure. Murmurs spread across the room. The human chose the scrap? Strange decision. Elias heard them, but did not react. He simply extended a hand slowly, showing no threat. The universal translator attempted communication, producing soft, fragmented sounds. "I mean no harm," he said gently. The alien tilted her head. A faint sound escaped her lips, musical but broken by static through the translator. He sensed fear, but also intelligence behind her silence. "What is her designation?" he asked. "Unknown," the officer replied.
"The species nearly extinct. Records incomplete." Elias nodded once.
"Then she comes with me." The decision followed him like a shadow as they boarded the transport ship. Other officers watched with disbelief. Some laughed openly. One even stopped him near the loading ramp. "You wasted your chance," the commander said. "Humans are supposed to be practical." Elias simply replied, "I am." Inside the ship, he guided the alien toward a quiet seating area. She moved carefully, watching every light panel and energy conduit as if mapping them in her mind. When the engines powered on, her breathing changed slightly, becoming more controlled. He noticed everything. The transport launched smoothly, joining the larger fleet returning to Coalition space. For a while, silence filled the room between them. Elias did not force conversation. He had learned long ago that trust often grew stronger when allowed to form naturally. Eventually, he activated the translator again. "I am Elias," he said slowly. The device struggled, translating only fragments. The alien listened, then placed a hand lightly against her chest. A soft word formed. Li-Ra. The translator repeated it imperfectly. "Lie," Elias said, testing the sound. She reacted with a small nod. Hours passed quietly. Crew members came and went, some staring openly at her. She ignored them, focusing instead on the ship itself. Her eyes tracked shifting power levels displayed on panels. At one point, she moved closer to a console, tilting her head as if listening to something beyond sound. Suddenly, alarms sounded. The ship shuddered violently.
"Power instability," a crew member shouted from the control area.
"Navigation failing." Lights flickered as the vessel drifted dangerously near an unstable debris field. Elias stood instantly, scanning the situation. Before anyone could stop her, Lyra moved quickly toward a nearby control panel. Crew members hesitated, unsure whether to stop her. Her hands hovered over the interface, then made a series of precise adjustments no one understood. The alarms softened, power flow stabilized. Navigation systems returned online. Silence filled the room. "Who authorized that?" someone demanded. Elias looked at Lyra. She stepped back, uncertain, almost expecting punishment, but the ship was safe. "Seems she did," Elias said quietly. The crew exchanged confused glances. One officer muttered, "Probably coincidence." Elias did not argue. Instead, he watched Lyra carefully. She seemed relieved, but also exhausted, as if interacting with the system required intense focus. As the journey continued, he began to realize something important. She reacted to the ship as if it were alive, sensing changes before sensors detected them. Later, standing by a viewing window, Elias looked at the stars stretching across endless darkness. Lyra stood nearby, watching the same view. The silence between them felt less heavy now. "You're not worthless," he said softly, more to himself than to her. She turned slightly, studying his face. Outside, distant lightning flickered through hyperspace currents. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, full of secrets hidden beneath assumptions. Elias felt certain of one thing. The others had not seen her clearly, but he had. And whatever path this decision led him toward, he knew it had already begun to change more than just his reputation. The transport ship arrived at the Coalition station after several long cycles of travel. From a distance, the station looked like a floating city made of silver rings and glowing towers. Ships of many shapes moved slowly around it, docking and departing like a constant dance. For most crew members, returning to the station meant rest and recognition after a successful mission. For Captain Elias Ward, it meant facing questions about the strange choice he had made. As he guided Lyra through the docking corridor, he felt the weight of curious eyes. News of his decision had traveled faster than their ship. Officers whispered quietly, some amused, others confused. A few looked openly annoyed. "That's the one?" someone said behind him. The human picked her over a tactical unit? Elias ignored the comments. Lyra walked beside him silently, her posture careful, but alert. The bright lights and constant movement of the station seemed to overwhelm her senses at times, but she continued forward without hesitation. He brought her to his assigned quarters, which were modest compared to higher-ranking officers. The room held simple furniture, a desk filled with data pads, and a wide viewing window showing the endless stars. Lyra paused at the entrance, studying the space as if deciding whether it was safe.
"You can stay here," Elias said gently.
The translator still struggled with her language, but she appeared to understand his tone. He activated environmental controls to match comfortable settings for both human and alien biology. Slowly, Lyra relaxed slightly. She moved toward the window, watching ships glide past like silent birds. Over the next few days, Elias noticed how carefully she observed everything. She rarely spoke, but her attention never wavered. When machines powered on or energy fields shifted, her eyes moved instantly toward the source. She seemed connected to the station in ways that others were not. Meanwhile, Elias attended debriefing sessions. Coalition commanders questioned him about his choice repeatedly. "You selected a non-viable asset," one official said sharply.
"Explain your reasoning." "I saw potential others missed," Elias replied calmly. "That is not an acceptable evaluation method." "It saved our transport ship," he answered.
"Without her actions, we may not have arrived safely." The officials exchanged skeptical looks. Some acknowledged the incident report, but most dismissed it as chance. "Humans often rely on instinct," another officer said. "This does not mean your choice has strategic value." He knew arguing too strongly would only strengthen their bias. Back in his quarters, he attempted to build communication with Lyra. He used visual symbols, gestures, and slow speech. The translator improved gradually, but many words remained unclear. Still, progress came through patience. One evening, Lyra approached his desk while he reviewed reports. She pointed toward a schematic displayed on his screen, a map of hyperspace routes connecting major systems. Her expression changed slightly, showing concern. "You recognize this?" he asked. She touched one of the lines gently, then shook her head and made a soft sound. The translator struggled but produced fragments. Broken, wrong, unstable. Elias leaned forward. "Unstable?" She nodded quickly. He studied the map again. Coalition engineers had reported minor irregularities in hyperspace corridors recently, but nothing considered dangerous. "Show me," he said. Lyra hesitated, then reached toward the interface. Her movements were slow but precise. She adjusted the display, highlighting areas where energy fluctuations had been recorded. Patterns began to appear, subtle distortions that most analysts ignored. Elias felt a spark of realization. "You can see things others can't," he said quietly. Lyra looked at him, unsure if he understood. Later that cycle, an emergency alert echoed through the station. Several ships traveling near a major hyperspace corridor experienced sudden system failures. Though no lives were lost, the incident created widespread concern. Elias requested permission to assist with analysis. His reputation helped him gain limited access. He brought Lyra with him despite resistance from some officers. "She is not cleared for sensitive areas," one guard protested. "She helped identify similar instability," Elias replied calmly. "If you want solutions, let her observe." After a tense moment, they allowed entry. Inside the operations room, large holographic displays showed shifting energy patterns. Engineers debated loudly, arguing about faulty sensors or navigation errors. Lyra stood quietly beside Elias, watching the data streams with intense focus. Suddenly, she stepped forward and touched a floating projection. Her hand moved along invisible lines, tracing patterns no one else had noticed. Engineers paused, confused. "What is she doing?" someone asked. Elias watched closely. He saw recognition in her eyes, almost like remembering something lost. The translator produced broken phrases as she spoke. Old, path, not cared for, breaking. Silence filled the room. You're saying the route itself is failing? Elias asked. Mm-hmm. She nodded. An engineer shook his head. Impossible. Hyperspace lanes are stable. Huh? Elias turned toward him. Are you sure we understand how they were built? The question lingered in the air. Over the following days, Elias and Lyra continued investigating. Slowly, fragments of her history emerged through shared images and symbols. Her species had once been known as resonants, beings capable of sensing energy flows directly rather than relying on machines. Long ago, they helped maintain ancient structures that stabilized travel across the galaxy. But as technology advanced, others stopped listening to them. Their knowledge faded into legend. Lyra showed him memories through holographic projections, vast structures humming with life, her people moving gracefully through glowing corridors. Then images shifted to abandonment, darkness, and silence. Elias felt a quiet anger. Entire civilizations had dismissed knowledge simply because it did not fit their expectations. During a patrol mission escorting civilian transports, his theory faced its first true test. While traveling through a supposedly safe hyperspace route, Lyra suddenly stiffened. Her breathing changed rapidly. Something wrong? Elias asked. She pointed toward empty space, eyes wide. Moments later, sensors detected rising instability. Navigation warnings flashed across the console. Adjust course now, Elias ordered. Pilots hesitated. But, Captain, do it. The ship moved, just as a violent energy wave tore through their previous position. Civilian vessels followed his lead, narrowly avoiding disaster. When they returned to the station, reports spread quickly. Some officers began reconsidering their earlier judgment. Still, many leaders resisted change. Admitting Lyra's importance meant admitting their own mistakes. One evening, Elias stood at the viewing window again. Lyra joined him quietly. Outside, ships moved like small lights against endless darkness. You knew before the sensors, he said softly. She looked at him, then gently placed her hand against the glass. For a moment he thought she seemed sad. You are called worthless, he continued. But you're not. She lowered her gaze. The translator struggled, but a single word came through clearly. Forgotten. Elias understood. And as new reports arrived about ancient systems failing across the galaxy, he realized their journey was only beginning. The news about hyperspace instability spread quickly across the Galactic Coalition. At first, many leaders tried to calm the situation, saying the problems were only temporary technical faults. But more reports arrived every cycle. Ships experienced sudden navigation failures. Travel routes that had remained stable for centuries began showing strange distortions. Some regions became dangerous without warning. Captain Elias Ward stood inside a briefing chamber surrounded by commanders from many species. Large holographic displays floated in the air, showing flashing data and shifting star maps. The atmosphere felt tense. We are seeing simultaneous failures across multiple hyperspace corridors, a senior analyst said. No common cause has been identified. Some officers argued about faulty upgrades. Others blamed unknown external forces. A few suggested enemy sabotage, but no explanation fully matched the evidence. Elias listened carefully before speaking. There may be another possibility, he said. Many eyes turned toward him. The systems we rely on might not be fully understood, he continued calmly. We may be using technology built on older structures that require maintenance we no longer perform. You're suggesting our entire navigation network depends on ancient systems? One asked. I'm suggesting we don't know as much as we think we do, Elias replied. He glanced toward Lyra, who stood quietly beside him. Some officers shifted uncomfortably, still unsure why a being labeled as low value was present in a strategic meeting. "She has identified patterns none of our sensors detected," Elias said. "Her species once worked with these systems." Murmurs filled the room.
"Even if that is true," another commander said, "we cannot rely on one individual." Elias nodded. "Then let's verify her observations."
After a long discussion, the Coalition agreed to send an investigation fleet toward one of the oldest hyperspace nodes, a region containing abandoned megastructures believed to be remnants of a precursor civilization. Few ships visited the area anymore because modern technology had replaced direct interaction with such sites. The journey began quietly. Elias stood on the bridge of his ship as stars stretched into lines during hyperspace travel. Lyra remained near the navigation console, her eyes closed at times as if feeling invisible waves moving around them. Crew members watched her with curiosity. Some had grown more respectful after recent events, though uncertainty remained. As they approached the ancient sector, strange signals appeared on sensors. Energy fluctuations twisted around the fleet, like invisible storms.
"Navigation system's lagging," a pilot reported. "Switch to manual control," Elias ordered.
The ships slowed carefully. Outside, enormous structures floated in space like silent giants. Long, curved beams formed rings larger than moons, their surfaces covered with faded markings. Some sections glowed faintly, while others remained dark and broken. Lyra stepped forward slowly. Her breathing became heavier, but not from fear. It felt more like recognition. "You know this place," Elias said quietly. She nodded. The fleet moved closer, and communication systems began experiencing interference. Artificial intelligence systems struggled to calculate safe paths through the unstable energy fields. "We are losing predictive modeling," an engineer said nervously. Lyra raised her hand gently. Elias gave her permission to approach the main console. Her fingers hovered above the controls before moving with careful precision. She adjusted power flow and ship positioning, guiding them along a path that sensors had marked as uncertain. The ship moved smoothly. Crew members exchanged surprised looks. Inside the megastructure, massive corridors opened like tunnels through a mountain. Lights flickered weakly, as if waiting to be awakened. Landing teams prepared to explore. Elias joined them, wearing protective gear while Lyra walked beside him without hesitation. The air inside felt still but charged with energy. Ancient symbols covered the walls. Some resembled star maps. Others looked like flowing patterns rather than written language. Lyra touched one gently, and a faint glow responded beneath her hand. "Power still active," an engineer whispered. As they moved deeper, they discovered enormous control chambers filled with silent machinery. Most devices were inactive, but traces of energy flowed through hidden pathways. Lyra walked slowly through the room, her movements careful and respectful. She seemed both sad and determined. The translator struggled as she spoke. "Hold, heart, broken." Elias studied the systems. Data panels showed energy flowcharts far more complex than modern technology. It became clear that hyperspace lanes were not simply natural routes, but part of a vast engineered network designed to stabilize travel across the galaxy. And that network was failing. "If this stops working," one scientist said quietly, "hyperspace travel could become unpredictable everywhere." The realization spread quickly through the team. Elias turned toward Lyra. "Can it be repaired?" She hesitated before nodding slowly. Work began immediately. Engineers attempted to reactivate sections of the structure while Lyra guided them toward systems others overlooked. She did not operate like a traditional technician. Instead, she moved through the chamber as if listening to music no one else could hear, adjusting components based on instinct and deep understanding. While progress continued, danger arrived. A hostile fleet emerged from hyperspace near the structure. Pirates and opportunists had learned about the instability and wanted control over the ancient network. If they could manipulate hyperspace routes, they would gain enormous power. Warning alarms echoed through the corridors.
"Enemy ships approaching!"
a pilot reported through communication channels. Elias acted quickly. He ordered defensive positions and coordinated with coalition vessels outside. Inside the structure, tension rose. Lyra continued working, despite the threat. She seemed completely focused, even as distant explosions shook the walls.
"You need to leave,"
Elias told her. She shook her head firmly. The translator produced broken words. "Must finish or all paths fail." Elias understood. He stayed beside her, protecting her while she synchronized with the system. Outside, a fierce battle unfolded. Coalition ships held the line, preventing enemy forces from reaching the station directly. Inside, energy levels began rising as ancient mechanisms awakened. Light flowed through long dormant circuits. Symbols on the walls glowed brighter. Lyra's breathing became strained. Elias noticed the effort required to connect with the system.
"You're pushing too hard,"
he said. She continued anyway. Finally, a deep vibration spread through the structure. The unstable energy fields outside began calming. Hyperspace distortions decreased rapidly. "It's working," an engineer said in disbelief. Enemy forces retreated as the coalition regained control of the area. Lyra stepped back slowly, exhaustion visible in every movement. Elias caught her before she fell. The ancient network had not been fully restored, but stability returned to nearby routes. As they left the megastructure, coalition leaders finally acknowledged her importance openly. Officers who once doubted her watched with respect. Yet Lyra's expression remained uncertain. Recognition came too late to erase years of being ignored. Standing beside the ship's window later, Elias looked at the stars again. "You changed everything," he said softly. She shook her head. The translator struggled but produced a simple phrase. "Together."
Elias smiled faintly. The galaxy had begun to realize the value of what it had once called
worthless, and the journey toward understanding was far from over. The return from the ancient megastructure changed everything. Reports about the stabilized hyperspace node spread quickly across the Galactic Coalition. Ships that had once feared traveling through unstable routes began moving again, and many systems that were close to isolation felt hope for the first time in many cycles. Captain Elias Ward stood quietly on the bridge as messages arrived one after another, each confirming that the repair had prevented a larger disaster. Yet the success also created new problems. Recognition meant attention, and attention meant politics. High-ranking officials requested meetings with Lyra. Scientists wanted to study her abilities. Commanders debated how her skills could be used to maintain control over hyperspace networks. Some leaders spoke respectfully, but others treated her more like a resource than a person. Elias noticed the change immediately. Before, many had ignored her. Now, too many wanted something from her. Lyra stayed calm, but he could see tension in her posture. Large crowds and constant questioning drained her energy. During brief moments alone, she stood near viewing windows, watching stars in silence, as if trying to remember a simpler time. One morning, Elias received an official summons to a strategic council chamber. Lyra accompanied him, though she seemed hesitant. Inside, representatives from many species sat around a circular table, glowing with holographic projections. Images of hyperspace networks rotated slowly above them, showing areas still unstable. A senior council member spoke first. "The stabilization of the ancient structure has confirmed that our modern navigation systems rely heavily on precursor technology," the leader said. "We must now establish a permanent program to restore remaining networks." Another official added, "Lyra possesses unique knowledge. We request her full cooperation under coalition supervision." Elias felt the tone of the request carried an expectation rather than a choice. He looked at Lyra, waiting for her response. She remained quiet for a moment before speaking softly. The translator struggled, but conveyed her meaning.
Help, yes.
Controlled, no. Murmurs filled the room. One commander leaned forward. The safety of billions depends on these repairs. Personal preferences cannot come before collective needs. Elias spoke calmly but firmly. She is not equipment. She chooses how to help. The discussion grew tense, but eventually the council agreed to a compromise. Lyra would assist voluntarily while remaining under Elias's protection as part of his crew. After leaving the chamber, Lyra looked relieved but tired. "You handled that well," Elias said. She gave a small nod. Work began immediately. Investigation fleets traveled to different regions where ancient systems had fallen silent. Lyra guided engineers, teaching them to observe energy patterns differently. Humans learned quickly, adapting their methods to combine technology with intuitive understanding. Other species watched with surprise as humans embraced unfamiliar ideas without hesitation. During one mission, Lyra stood beside a group of young engineers explaining how energy flowed like currents in a river, rather than fixed lines. Her confidence grew slowly. She no longer avoided eye contact as often. Instead, she spoke with gentle certainty. Elias noticed the change with quiet pride. However, the deeper they went into the restoration effort, the more they discovered how fragile the galaxy's infrastructure had become. Entire regions relied on systems that had not been maintained for centuries. Each repair revealed another hidden weakness. Then came the warning. A massive hyperspace storm formed near a densely populated core system. Unlike previous instabilities, this phenomenon expanded rapidly, distorting space itself. Ships caught inside vanished from sensors within seconds. Scientists predicted that if the storm reached critical intensity, it could collapse several major travel routes permanently. Emergency meetings filled every communication channel. Evacuation plans began immediately. Elias watched the projection silently while Lyra stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the swirling energy patterns. She stepped closer to the display. "Not random," she said softly. "What do you mean?" he asked. She traced a path through the storm's movement, showing how energy waves collided in repeating cycles. System, calling, correct, broken harmony. Elias frowned slightly. "You think it's reacting to something missing?" She nodded. The realization spread through the command team. The storm might be a response to failing ancient networks trying to stabilize themselves without guidance. Lyra turned toward him. "Risk, solution," she said. He waited. She explained through fragmented translation that entering the storm directly and synchronizing with its core energy might allow them to calm it. The plan required precise coordination between her resonance ability and human improvisation to adapt in real time. The risk was enormous. Many commanders opposed the idea immediately. "Sending a ship into that storm is suicide," one officer argued. Elias remained quiet until the room settled. "If we do nothing, billions could lose safe travel routes," he said calmly. "We have a chance to prevent that." After long debate, permission was granted for a small specialized team to attempt the mission. As the ship approached the storm, space itself seemed to twist. Bright waves of energy moved like living currents, unpredictable and powerful. The hull vibrated continuously as they crossed the boundary. "Shields holding," a pilot reported. Lyra moved toward the central console, closing her eyes briefly. The translator remained silent as she focused completely on the energy around them. Elias stood beside her, ready to adjust commands instantly. The storm pushed against them from every direction. Sensors struggled to interpret readings, forcing the crew to rely more on instinct and teamwork. Left thrusters now, Lyra whispered. Elias gave the order without hesitation. The ship shifted, just as a violent surge passed through their previous position. Minutes felt like hours. Sweat covered the crew as they navigated deeper toward the storm's core. Finally, they reached a region where energy moved in spiraling patterns. Lyra placed both hands on the console, her body glowing faintly as she synchronized with the system. Light spread outward from the ship, forming waves that matched the storm's rhythm. Energy stabilizing, an engineer said in disbelief. Outside, the violent currents slowed. The chaotic movement became smoother, like a storm turning into calm wind. Lyra's breathing grew heavy, but she continued. Elias watched closely, ready to intervene if she weakened too much. After what felt like endless moments, the storm began collapsing inward, harmlessly. Energy levels returned to normal ranges. Cheers erupted across communication channels. They had done it. As the ship exited the storm, silence filled the bridge for a few seconds, before relief spread through the crew. Many looked toward Lyra with deep respect. Later, during a public broadcast, the Coalition acknowledged her contributions openly. The story of the worthless alien who saved entire systems reached countless worlds. But for Elias, the most important moment came quietly. He found Lyra standing alone at a viewing deck, watching ships travel safely through restored routes. "You changed how the galaxy sees value," he said. She shook her head gently. "Human time." Human.
"Saw first," she replied through the translator. He smiled slightly.
Outside, endless stars moved slowly as ships passed between them. Humanity gained respect not only for strength, but for seeing potential, where others saw nothing. And in the quiet between two unlikely allies, a new future began. One built not on power alone, but on understanding.